Hello Team FD and welcome back to Winners and Losers, where we break down the latest and greatest Premier League action. Now, we strayed away from the weekend's games in clip number 1 and we're going to do that again in clip number 2 here. Instead of looking back at the results, we're going to anoint our Premier League manager of the season so far. Now, we picked our teams of the season so far. Zach, Joe and I did on Sunday Vibes, but we failed to pick a manager to lead those dream teams. And that is because I was waiting for someone of your calibre, Diggs, to be available to me. So you're going to be the man to anoint, like I said, the manager of the season so far. Now, off camera, we did narrow it down to 2. We did narrow it down to Arteta and Howe. Obviously, have got lots of love from all quarters this season, but I want to hear your take on things. I don't know whether you want to go through this methodically, one then the other, or you just want to dive right in with who you think is the best qualified.
I'll just say, okay. I'm going for manager of the season so far. It's a tough decision, but I'm going with Mikel Arteta.
Okay.
I'm going with Mikel Arteta. I think that is not just Sunderland bias coming through as well. I think Eddie Howe has done a magnificent job so far. We'll get on to him as well. But if you ask me, as we broke for the World Cup, would Arsenal be 5 points clear at the top of the Premier League? I would have been flabbergasted, to be honest. I thought they might finish in the top 4 this year. I never saw a title challenge really coming into existence. And they've been brilliant so far. 12 wins out of 14 in the league. And they deserve to be there. For those who love their stats, they should be top by expected points, which is interesting. Newcastle, interestingly, should be 3rd by expected points, where they find themselves as well. So both these sides deserve to be there.
It's a big thumbs up for the expected points metric.
Absolutely. For once. Yeah. And I think they've just been magnificent so far. They've risen to every challenge. Yes, they had that defeat against Man United. But other than that, I think they've been pretty excellent so far. The second half against Southampton, that game they drew as well, wasn't so good. And even in that Man United game, I don't think they were played off the park. They made some errors late in the game trying to chase the game, and Man United scored a few counter-attack goals. But I think they've risen to every challenge. They've beaten Liverpool, they've beaten Spurs, they beat Chelsea pretty comprehensively the weekend before last. And then on Saturday evening, knowing that Man City had dropped points against Brentford, they had a massive opportunity to open up a 5-point gap, and they got the job done against Wolves, which I thought was a massive sign of a team really, at the top of its game. And as we briefly touched upon off camera, it's really the collective. The whole unit is playing exceptionally well. There are some star players in there, but I just think Arteta has just got this team playing at the top of their game and peaking at just the right time.
Yeah, that is interesting. That's why I found it quite hard to identify players from Arsenal starting 11 who made it into my team of the season despite them being top. Because Mikel Arteta has made them more than the sum of their parts, and that's a great credit to him. But I did go for Saliba, I went for Saka, I think Tomlinson went for Partey as well,
Good shout.
And Zach did a little nod to Martinelli, so they're all well represented across the teams. Just to supplement your lovely stats with some of my own, yes, they got the underlying numbers here. Second best record for shots conceded per game. Second for expected goals. Second for expected goals against. Third for shots taken per game. Only bettered by City and Liverpool in the aforementioned categories. And yeah, like you said, expected points has them fractionally ahead of City in top spot. Before the last game week, I still thought City marginally the better side. Obviously, we saw that there is a discrepancy between Arsenal's strongest 11 and when they have to rotate against Brighton, which may well see City still clinch the title over the course of a 38-game season. They have more strength and depth, but Arsenal might dip their toe in the January transfer window and solidify that central area of the pitch. Does need a little bit of work, doesn't it? But it is impressive that Arteta's doing all of this with the youngest squad in the Premier League as well, an average age of 24.7 from the players used anyway. Let's pay Eddie Howe some lip service though, because like you said, they are looking absolutely formidable. Third in the table, third for expected goals, third for expected goals against. I mean, a little caveat there is that they have played one more match than some of the teams around them. Fifth for shots taken, fifth for least shots conceded. I suppose have spent a significant amount of money. We've touched upon that in previous episodes before. People give us jip in the comment if we don't sort of provide that as a caveat, and rightly so as well. They have brought in some excellent players, but the recruitment has been pretty much spot on. Textbook how to fix, that is, from Football Daily. We're very, very pleased with their recruitment department, particularly Bruno Guimaraes, obviously arrived last season, but The boys that arrived in January have banged, haven't they? So I guess a couple general themes I want to hit upon before we end this clip. I mean, what have you been most impressed about from these two managers? Some general themes I've got: both improved players, maybe a lack of, so I want to say stars on both teams, but I mean more so elite players or players who would be regarded in the top 3 in their position in world football, like you'd find at Liverpool, Manchester City, perhaps Chelsea, Real Madrid, Barcelona. What kind of things do you gravitate towards when you heap praise upon these two?
Yeah, I think you're right to mention their recruitment, and Newcastle have spent a lot of money, but I don't really see any other manager or very few other managers managing to improve players and get this team going in the same way Howe has. And I think he deserves an enormous amount of respect for that. I think some people at Football Daily were quite sceptical about his appointment. Don't need to name names, but we know who they were. And we're worried about the defence, but he's got the joint best defensive record in the league along with Arsenal now. And it's not just those star players you mentioned as well. I think the players that were already there who have really risen to the task as well, the likes of Fabian Schär, who's created a great partnership with Sven Botman again on Saturday against Chelsea. We saw that in action. The likes of Sean Longstaff, who, to be honest, I didn't think was a Premier League player a year and a half ago or a year ago. Miguel Almiron, 6 goals in October alone, being one of their stars of the season. And considering that they've had injury issues as well, with Callum Wilson missing games, with Alexander Isak missing games as well, I think to be in this position with the 3rd best goal difference in the entire league, 3rd by expected points, is a massive, massive credit to him. The only signing since he's probably arrived or since the Newcastle takeover, which hasn't gone swimmingly, is probably Chris Wood, but who's probably past his best, to be honest, and was more of a stopgap and his 3rd choice.
A tactile one as well. They weakened a direct relegation rival at that point.
And they did go down. Yeah. So it kind of made sense. But yeah, I think for Newcastle to be in the position they are is quite staggering at this moment. I think at the start of the season, I probably thought they were the best of the rest outside the top 6. So to be 3rd at this stage of the season deserves an enormous amount of credit. And if someone in the comments or elsewhere wanted to say Howe for manager of the season, you can't really argue with it too much. But for me personally, I'm just going with Arteta.
Yeah, and something you mentioned there, I think we don't really focus on enough, and that is his evolution as a manager. Obviously, his Bournemouth side were very porous. He was known as someone that could put together a very resourceful and effective attack, but not necessarily known for defensive solidity. And look at him now. Went off and studied Atleti, didn't he? And the various Red Bull teams. So yeah, really impressive stuff from him. I'm just looking at the Arsenal team now. I mean, Granit Xhaka, when it comes to most improved players, is of course at the forefront of most people's minds. Ben White excelling in that right back position. I think he deserves a little bit more credit than we afforded him on Sunday Vibes. But people that think he's been better than Kieran Trippier, just plain wrong. What about Martinelli, though? Because I know you want to spend a little bit of time talking about him.
Yeah, I remember being on Team Talk about 6 weeks ago, and we had Bavs and Grizz Khan on there. And Bavs, who I was particularly interested in being an Arsenal fan, was saying that Martinelli, there are arguments that he will go further than Saka, which I thought was at the time a bit ridiculous, to be honest, given where they were 6 weeks ago. But in the last, month or so, his consistency, his output coming in from that flank as well, his energy. In the game against Wolves at the weekend, he was, scouring across the entire pitch. He was picking up balls, making that attack tick in the same way that Martin Odegaard did, or does throughout this season as well. So I think Martinelli completely deserves his place in that Brazil squad. He probably won't feature too much at the World Cup, but his improvement is massively down to Mikel Arteta as well. But Granit Xhaka is the key one. I think the way that he retains possession in dangerous areas, his vision going forward has always been great. It's just when he has to turn behind him, it's his weakness in his game. But I think Arteta and Howe, their improvement amongst core members of that squad is unquestionable. Yeah,
and I think that triumvirate of players we just mentioned definitely knocking on the door of team of the season if they carry on playing like they are. It's going to be really interesting come May, isn't it? But that is the end of Winners and Losers for today. Who is your manager of the season so far? 14 games in. Feels a bit premature, but it's World Cup season, isn't it? So we've got to talk about something. Like this video, subscribe to the channel with notifications on, and we'll catch you on next week's Winners and Losers, which is of course going to be World Cup themed.
It's off.
Probably won't cover Qatar versus Ecuador, but there we go. Goodbye.